Tuesday morning of my life. I'm sitting at my kitchen table, coffee getting cold, staring at our bank statement like it's written in a foreign language. Where there should be $80,000 for my daughter Emma's college fund, there's nothing. Just a big, fat zero that made my stomach drop to the floor. I'm thinking maybe it's a mistake, maybe the bank messed up, because surely my husband Tom wouldn't just make our daughter's future disappear without telling me, right? Wrong. So incredibly wrong. I called the bank 3 times, each conversation making my hand shake worse than the last. The final call confirmed my worst nightmare: multiple transfers, all authorized by Tom, all going to someone named Patricia Morrison. Our neighbor. The woman whose son Jake just started his sophomore year at an expensive private college. The pieces started clicking together like a horrible puzzle, and ladies, what I discovered next made me question everything about the man I'd shared a bed with for 15 years. But the money trail was just the beginning of his lies. Picture this: I'm standing in our garage at 6:30 p.m., holding printed bank statements, waiting for Tom to come home from his overtime shift that I was starting to doubt even existed. When his car pulls in, I don't even let him get out before I'm waving those papers like evidence in a courtroom. "Tom, we need to talk, now." The look on his face? Pure panic mixed with guilt, like a teenager caught sneaking back in after curfew. His first response: "Honey, I can explain everything." But his explanation was so insulting to my intelligence that I actually started laughing, not the good kind of laughing, but the kind that happens when you realize you've been married to a stranger. He tells me Patricia was desperate, and that Jake is like a son to him, and that he knew I'd understand eventually. Like I'm some kind of saint who would just smile and nod while he gambled away our daughter's future. The audacity was breathtaking. But what came out of his mouth next made me see red. His excuse was so outrageous, I thought he was joking. Get ready for this gem, ladies, because Tom's justification was a masterclass in manipulation. He looks me dead in the eye and says, "Patricia reminded me of you when you were struggling in college, and I thought you'd want me to help her the way someone should have helped you back then." Are you kidding me? Using my past struggles to justify betraying our daughter? I reminded him that when I was struggling in college, I worked 3 part-time jobs and ate ramen noodles for 2 years straight. I didn't have some married man secretly funding my education behind his wife's back. But Tom doubles down, gets all defensive, starts talking about being a good neighbor and investing in young people's futures. Meanwhile, our actual daughter, the child we created together, is upstairs doing homework, completely unaware that her college dreams just evaporated. The worst part? He seemed genuinely confused about why I was upset. Like I was being unreasonable for expecting my husband to discuss major financial decisions with me before making them. But this wasn't just poor communication, and I was about to find out exactly how deep this rabbit hole went. Then I asked him the question that changed everything. Emma found out the next morning, and watching my daughter's face crumble is an image that will haunt me forever. She'd been working so hard, honor roll every semester, varsity track, volunteer work at the animal shelter, all while dreaming of studying veterinary medicine at State University. When I had to tell her that her college fund was gone, that all her planning and hard work might not be enough anymore, she just stood there in our kitchen in her pajamas, holding her acceptance letter like it was suddenly worthless. But here's what broke my heart even more: she didn't get angry. She didn't scream or cry or throw a teenage tantrum. Instead, she looked at me with these wise, sad eyes and said, "Mom, is this why Dad's been acting so weird lately?" My 17-year-old daughter was more mature about this betrayal than her own father. She sat down at the table, pulled out her laptop, and started researching student loans and scholarship applications like the warrior I raised her to be. But what she did later that day, that's when I knew Tom had messed with the wrong family. Emma's next move would expose everything. After Emma went to school, I did what any smart woman would do. I became a detective. I pulled every bank statement, credit card bill, and financial document I could find. Ladies, what I discovered made my blood boil. This wasn't just one $80,000 transfer. Tom had been systematically moving money for 8 months, smaller amounts at first, then bigger chunks, all going to Patricia Morrison or directly to Jake's college. But here's the kicker, he'd been taking money from other places too. Our emergency fund, our vacation savings, even money from my grandmother's inheritance that was supposed to be for Emma's wedding someday. We're talking about nearly $120,000 total, not just the college fund. He'd basically been running a secret charity for our neighbors while our own family's financial security went down the drain. I found receipts for dinners he'd paid for, car repairs he'd covered, even what looked like rent payments. This man was essentially supporting another family while lying to his own. But the worst discovery was still coming, and it would reveal just how calculated and manipulative Tom really was. The receipts told a story I wasn't prepared for. Time for some truth about our sweet neighbor Patricia. You know how some women have that ability to make themselves seem helpless and vulnerable around men? Patricia had turned it into an art form. I started paying attention to their interactions, and suddenly everything made sense. The way she just happened to be outside gardening whenever Tom got home from work. How she'd show up at our door with baking emergencies that required borrowing Tom's truck. The sob stories about being a single mom struggling to give her son opportunities. But here's what really got me. I discovered Tom had been telling her intimate details about our financial situation, our marriage problems, even personal things about Emma. Patricia knew exactly how much money we had and exactly which buttons to push to get Tom to hand it over. This woman wasn't some desperate damsel in distress, she was a master manipulator who'd identified the perfect mark, my husband, with his savior complex and desperate need to feel important. But what I found in Tom's emails would prove that Patricia wasn't the only one playing games. Patricia's real plan was more sinister than I imagined. Remember how I said Emma was a fighter? Well, my daughter decided she wasn't going down without swinging. That afternoon she marched right up to Patricia's front door and knocked like she owned the place. I watched from our kitchen window as my 17-year-old daughter stood on that porch, shoulders back, chin up, having what looked like a very serious conversation with a woman twice her age. When Emma came home, she had this look in her eyes, not angry, not upset, just determined. "Mom," she said, "I asked Patricia if she knew where my college money went, and you know what she said? She said Dad told her we had so much money that we wouldn't even miss it." The nerve. But Emma wasn't done. She'd already contacted the school counselor about additional scholarships, reached out to State University about work-study programs, and even started a part-time job application. While Tom was busy playing sugar daddy to the neighbors, his own daughter was handling business like the mature, responsible person he should have been. But Emma's investigation into Patricia revealed something that made my stomach turn. What Emma discovered next would change how we saw everything. Ladies, have you ever had one of those moments where you know you should stop looking, but you just can't help yourself? That was me, going through Tom's phone while he was in the shower. What I found in his text messages with Patricia made me physically sick. These weren't just conversations about money or Jake's college expenses. These were intimate, emotional exchanges that read like Tom was having an emotional affair right under my nose. Patricia calling him her hero and her knight in shining armor. Tom responding with things like, "I just want to take care of you, and Emma will understand someday, but you need this now." But the worst part? Messages about me. Patricia asking if I was giving him a hard time about money again, and Tom complaining about how controlling and selfish I was being about our family's finances. My own husband was badmouthing me to the woman he was secretly funding with our daughter's future. The betrayal went so much deeper than money. He'd chosen this woman's emotional needs over his own family's financial security, and he'd been trash-talking me while doing it. But one message revealed the truth about their relationship. That one message changed everything. I know we can't be together the way we want to, but taking care of Jake feels like I'm taking care of the family we could have had. Are you kidding me? This man was living in some fantasy world where he was Patricia's husband and Jake's stepfather, all while sitting at my dinner table every night pretending to be a devoted family man. The emotional affair had been going on for over a year, with Tom positioning himself as Patricia's financial and emotional savior while treating his actual family like we were holding him back from his true happiness. There were messages about secret coffee dates, long phone calls while I thought he was working late, and Tom even helping Jake with college applications, attention and energy that should have gone to Emma. But here's the part that made me absolutely furious: Patricia wasn't even divorced. She was separated, still legally married, and using Tom as her personal ATM while she figured out her own life. My husband was funding another woman's transition out of her marriage while potentially destroying his own. The level of stupidity and betrayal was staggering, but I was just getting started uncovering the truth. The deeper I dug, the more lies I uncovered. Time for some cold, hard numbers that'll make your head spin. I sat down with all our financial documents and calculated the real damage Tom had done to our family's security. Beyond the $120,000 he'd given to Patricia and Jake, there were credit cards I didn't know about, a second mortgage he'd taken out on our house without telling me, and retirement funds he'd borrowed against. We weren't just broke, we were in debt to the tune of nearly $200,000. 20 years of careful saving, budgeting and planning for our family's future, gone. Our daughter's college education, gone. My sense of financial security that I'd worked so hard to build after growing up poor, completely destroyed. But the worst part? Tom had forged my signature on some of these documents. He'd literally committed fraud against his own wife to fund his emotional affair with our neighbor. When I confronted him with the evidence, he had the audacity to say I was blowing things out of proportion and that we could figure it out together. Figure what out? How to rebuild our entire financial life from scratch because he decided to play house with another family. But Tom's financial crimes were just the beginning. You know how small neighborhoods are, secrets have a way of spreading faster than wildfire. Within a week of Emma's conversation with Patricia, somehow the whole story was making its way through our community. I'm talking about whispered conversations at the grocery store, awkward silences when I'd show up at school events, and suddenly everyone knew that Tom had drained his daughter's college fund for the neighbors. But here's what surprised me: instead of judgment, I got support. Other women started reaching out, sharing their own stories of financial betrayal and husbands who'd made major decisions without consulting them. Sarah from down the street told me about her ex-husband who'd secretly invested their savings in his brother's failed restaurant. Maria from Emma's school shared how her husband had been sending money to his ex-wife for years without her knowledge. I realized Tom's behavior wasn't just a personal failing, it was part of a pattern of men who think they can make unilateral decisions about their family's money and future. The community support gave me strength, but it also made Tom's betrayal even more humiliating for him. Good. He deserved to face the consequences of his choices. The public shame was just the motivation I needed. Ladies, when your husband commits financial fraud against your family, you don't just accept it and move on. You get yourself a lawyer. I made an appointment with Rebecca Martinez, the best divorce attorney in our area, and walked into her office with 3 boxes of financial documents, printed text messages, and a list of questions longer than my grocery receipt. Rebecca took one look at the evidence and said something that gave me chills. "Honey, this isn't just marital problems. This is financial abuse, and in some cases it's criminal. She explained how Tom's pattern of secret financial decisions, forged signatures, and emotional manipulation constituted a form of domestic abuse that many women don't recognize until it's too late. We talked about asset protection, ways to recover some of the stolen money, and most importantly, how to secure Emma's future regardless of what happened to my marriage. Rebecca also connected me with a financial advisor who specialized in helping women rebuild after financial betrayal. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a plan and people in my corner who understood the gravity of what Tom had done to our family. But Rebecca's advice about Tom would shock me. Rebecca gave me advice that changed my entire approach: don't let him know what you know all at once. Control the narrative and the timeline. So instead of laying all my cards on the table, I started strategically revealing information to see how much deeper Tom would dig his own grave. First, I mentioned finding the second mortgage paperwork. Tom's response? More lies. He claimed it was for home improvements that he wanted to surprise me with. Then I brought up the credit cards. More excuses about temporary cash flow issues that he was handling. Each lie made it easier for me to see Tom for who he really was, a man who would rather destroy his family's trust than admit he'd made catastrophic mistakes. But the final test came when I told him I knew about Patricia. Instead of remorse or apology, he got defensive and angry. He accused me of snooping and not understanding their friendship. That's when I knew my marriage was over. A man who protects his affair partner's feelings over his wife's financial security isn't a husband worth fighting for. His reaction to being caught would be his biggest mistake. While I was dealing with lawyers and financial advisors, Emma was busy being more mature than both her parents combined. She'd researched every scholarship opportunity available, applied to 3 additional universities with better financial aid programs, and even started a part-time job at the local veterinary clinic to start earning her own college money. But here's what made me proudest: she refused to let Tom's betrayal define her future. When he tried to have a heart-to-heart with her about the situation, Emma looked him straight in the eye and said, "Dad, I'm disappointed in your choices, but I won't let your mistakes ruin my dreams." She had a backup plan, a work-study arrangement, and 3 potential scholarship opportunities that could cover most of her tuition. My daughter was handling the crisis Tom created with more grace and responsibility than he'd shown in months. But Emma also had something else planned, something that would make Tom face the consequences of his actions in a way he never expected. Emma's plan would give Tom a taste of his own medicine. Remember how I said news travels fast in small communities? Well, Patricia was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Once people knew she'd been the recipient of Tom's secret generosity, the neighborhood dynamic shifted completely. Suddenly, everyone was looking at her differently, not as the struggling single mom who needed help, but as the woman who'd manipulated a married man into funding her lifestyle. The school pickup line got awkward fast. The neighborhood book club stopped including her. Even Jake started getting weird looks from other kids who knew their college money had come from someone else's family. But here's what really got to Patricia: when other neighbors started questioning whether their own husbands had been secretly helping her too. Turns out, Patricia had a pattern of finding generous men to solve her financial problems, and Tom wasn't her first victim. Mrs. Chen from across the street revealed that Patricia had tried the same sob story with her husband about needing help with car repairs. The community was finally seeing Patricia for what she was: a manipulative opportunist who preyed on men's savior complexes. But Patricia's response would reveal her true character. When Patricia realized the neighborhood had turned against her, her sweet, helpless act disappeared completely. She showed up at my door one evening, not to apologize or acknowledge the damage she'd caused, but to blame me for ruining her reputation and making things difficult for Jake. Can you believe the audacity? This woman had systematically manipulated my husband into stealing from our daughter's future, and she was angry at me for exposing her? She actually said Tom offered to help us voluntarily, and now you're trying to make me look like some kind of villain. I looked at this woman who'd been calling my husband her hero and complaining about his controlling wife, and realized she felt absolutely no remorse for what she'd done to our family. She was angry that her free ride was over and that she might actually have to face consequences for her actions. When I told her she needed to leave our property immediately, she had the nerve to threaten me, saying she'd tell everyone that I was just jealous of her friendship with Tom. That's when I knew Patricia was dangerous in ways I hadn't even considered. Her threats would backfire spectacularly. Ladies, there comes a moment in every woman's life when she has to choose between being a victim and being a victor. For me, that moment was standing in my driveway, listening to Patricia threaten me over the consequences of her own manipulative behavior. I made my choice right then and there. I was done being the understanding wife, the accommodating neighbor, and the woman who kept quiet to avoid making waves. I went back inside, called Rebecca, my lawyer, and said I'm ready to file for divorce and pursue every legal avenue to recover our money. Then I did something that felt incredibly empowering. I opened a new bank account in just my name, transferred my paycheck and any remaining shared funds I could legally access, and started building a financial foundation that Tom couldn't touch. I also started documenting everything, every conversation, every threat, every lie, because I was going to make sure Emma's future was protected, even if it meant burning down the life Tom and I had built together. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice and making sure no other family got destroyed by his selfish choices. But my first step would send shockwaves through both families. Rebecca wasn't kidding when she said Tom's actions might be criminal. After reviewing all the evidence, she recommended we file a police report for fraud and identity theft, specifically for the forged signatures and the second mortgage taken out without my knowledge. I'll never forget the look on Tom's face when two detectives showed up at his office to question him about financial fraud against his own family. Suddenly, this wasn't just a marital dispute or a neighborhood drama, it was a potential criminal case that could result in felony charges. The bank froze several accounts pending the investigation. Patricia got served with papers demanding repayment of the fraudulently obtained funds, and Tom had to hire his own criminal attorney. But here's what really drove the point home. Jake had to withdraw from his expensive private college mid-semester because Patricia could no longer afford the tuition without Tom's illegal funding. The ripple effects of Tom's choices were finally catching up with everyone involved, and the fantasy world he'd been living in was collapsing fast. The police investigation would uncover even more secrets. While Tom was dealing with lawyers and criminal investigations, Emma was out there making her own miracles happen. Remember how I said she was a fighter? Well, my daughter didn't just apply for scholarships, she won them. 3 full scholarships, including one specifically for students who'd overcome family financial hardship. When Emma called me from school crying happy tears because she'd not only secured her college funding, but actually had more opportunities than before Tom's betrayal, I realized something profound. His attempt to destroy our family's future had actually revealed our strength and resilience. Emma's scholarship essay about overcoming adversity and taking responsibility for her own dreams was so powerful that 2 universities tried to recruit her. She'd turned Tom's worst decision into her greatest triumph, proving that she was nothing like the father who'd let her down. But Emma had one more surprise that would teach Tom a lesson he'd never forget. Emma's final move would leave Tom speechless. Something beautiful happened as news of Emma's scholarship victory spread through our community. Other families started rallying around us in ways I never expected. Sarah from down the street organized a fundraiser for Emma's college expenses not covered by scholarships. The veterinary clinic where Emma worked offered her additional hours and training opportunities. Even families I barely knew started reaching out with offers of support, mentorship, and encouragement. But the most meaningful support came from other women who'd survived financial betrayal in their own marriages. We formed an informal support group, sharing resources about financial protection, legal rights, and emotional recovery. These women taught me that Tom's behavior wasn't unique. Financial abuse and secret spending are more common than most people realize, but they also showed me that recovery was possible. Their stories of rebuilding their lives, protecting their children, and creating better futures gave me hope and practical strategies. I wasn't just surviving Tom's betrayal, I was building a network of strong women who would never let anyone take advantage of us again. But our support network would become Tom's worst nightmare. As Tom watched his life fall apart, criminal investigation, potential divorce, community ostracism, and his daughter's disappointment, he started making increasingly desperate attempts to fix what he'd broken. First, he tried the guilt trip approach, begging me to think about our family and not throw away 15 years of marriage over a mistake. When that didn't work, he switched to anger, accusing me of being vindictive and trying to destroy him. Then came the promises. He'd go to therapy, he'd cut all contact with Patricia, he'd get a second job to pay back the money. But ladies, here's what I learned about men like Tom: they're not sorry for what they did, they're sorry they got caught. Every apology came with an excuse, every promise came with a condition, and every attempt at reconciliation was really about avoiding consequences rather than making genuine amends. When Tom realized I wasn't going to be manipulated back into accepting his betrayal, he made his biggest mistake yet. He tried to turn Emma against me by telling her I was being unreasonable and breaking up the family over money. Emma's response would be the final nail in his coffin. The day Emma decided to have a real conversation with her father about his choices was the day Tom lost his daughter's respect forever. I wasn't there, but Emma told me later that she sat Tom down and said, "Dad, I need you to explain to me why Patricia's son's education was more important than mine." When Tom started with his usual excuses about helping others and being generous, Emma stopped him cold. "Dad, you didn't help Patricia's family. You stole from ours. There's a difference between generosity and theft, and what you did was theft." But here's the part that broke my heart and made me proud at the same time. Emma told Tom that she'd lost respect for him, not because he made a mistake, but because he kept lying about it even after getting caught. She said, "A real man would have admitted he was wrong, apologized sincerely, and worked to fix it. Instead, you're still making excuses and blaming Mom for your consequences." My 17-year-old daughter had more integrity and emotional intelligence than her father, and she made sure he knew it. Tom's response would show his true priorities. Filing for divorce felt both devastating and liberating. Devastating because I was officially ending 15 years of marriage and the future I'd planned with Tom. Liberating because I was finally free from the constant stress of wondering what financial disaster he'd create next. Rebecca guided me through the process with the expertise of someone who'd seen too many women in my situation. We filed for divorce on grounds of financial fraud and irreconcilable differences, seeking not just an equitable division of assets but also restitution for the money Tom had stolen from our family. The court ordered Tom to provide full financial disclosure, every account, every debt, every transaction, which revealed even more secret spending I hadn't discovered. But here's what gave me the most satisfaction: the judge was not impressed with Tom's excuses. When Tom tried to explain his generous nature and desire to help others, the judge pointed out that charity begins at home and that he'd violated his fiduciary duty to his own family. The legal system was finally holding Tom accountable for his choices. The judge's final ruling would change everything. Rebuilding our financial life from the ground up felt overwhelming at first, but with help from my financial advisor and the support of other women who'd been through similar situations, I created a comprehensive recovery plan. First priority, securing Emma's education funding, which was already handled thanks to her scholarship victories. Second, protecting my own financial future by establishing credit in my name only, building an emergency fund, and creating investment accounts Tom couldn't access. Third, pursuing every legal avenue to recover the money Tom had stolen, including liens against his income and seizure of assets he'd hidden. But the most important part of my financial recovery wasn't about money, it was about education. I learned about financial abuse, asset protection, and how to recognize the warning signs I'd missed in my marriage. I also started teaching Emma about financial independence and the importance of maintaining separate assets, even in committed relationships. We weren't just recovering from Tom's betrayal, we were building a stronger, more secure foundation for our future. But our financial success would trigger Tom's final desperate act. While I was busy rebuilding my life, Patricia was discovering that actions have consequences. The criminal investigation into Tom's financial fraud meant she had to repay the money she'd received, money she'd already spent on tuition, living expenses, and who knows what else. She ended up having to take out high-interest loans and sell her car to make the court-ordered restitution payments. Jake had to transfer to a community college and get a job to help support the family. But here's the part that really showed Patricia's character. Instead of taking responsibility for her role in manipulating Tom and destroying our family, she blamed everyone else. She told anyone who would listen that I was vindictive, that Tom was weak, and that she was just an innocent victim of circumstances. The community wasn't buying it. Patricia's reputation was permanently damaged, and she eventually moved to another state to escape the consequences of her actions. Her pattern of manipulating generous men had finally caught up with her, and she'd learned that not every woman would quietly accept being victimized. But Patricia's departure would reveal one final secret. Just when I thought I'd uncovered all of Tom's financial deception, Patricia's move out of state triggered one more discovery that left me speechless. While cleaning out Tom's home office to prepare for our asset division, I found documents showing he'd been planning to leave me long before the Patricia situation exploded. There were consultations with divorce attorneys, research about asset hiding strategies, and even apartment rental applications. Tom hadn't just betrayed our family financially, he'd been planning his exit strategy while lying to my face about our future together. But here's the kicker, he'd also opened investment accounts and hidden assets that he planned to take with him when he left. The man who claimed he was just being generous to neighbors had actually been systematically stealing from his own family to fund his new life with Patricia. This wasn't a midlife crisis or poor judgment, it was calculated financial abuse designed to leave Emma and me with nothing while he started over with his affair partner. Finding these documents would be my trump card. While Tom was facing criminal charges and I was fighting for financial justice, Emma was thriving in ways that proved she was going to be just fine without her father's support. She started her freshman year at State University with full scholarship funding, a work-study position at the veterinary school, and more confidence than ever. But the best part? Emma used her experience with family financial trauma to help other students facing similar situations. She became a peer counselor for students dealing with family crises and started a support group for kids whose college plans had been disrupted by parental financial abuse. My daughter turned her pain into purpose, and watching her help other young people navigate family betrayal while building her own successful future was one of the proudest moments of my life. Emma also maintained boundaries with Tom that were healthier than anything I'd managed during our marriage. She agreed to limited contact but made it clear that rebuilding their relationship would require him to take full responsibility for his choices and make genuine amends, not just empty promises. Emma's success would inspire my own transformation. Ladies, surviving your husband's betrayal and financial abuse doesn't just change your bank account, it changes you as a person in ways you never expected. I discovered strength I didn't know I had, developed financial skills I'd never needed before, and built a support network of incredible women who taught me what real friendship looks like. I also learned to trust my instincts again. Looking back, I realized there had been warning signs about Tom's character that I'd ignored or explained away for years. The way he made major decisions without consulting me, his need to be seen as a hero and savior, his tendency to prioritize other people's approval over his family's needs. These weren't quirks or personality differences, they were red flags I'd been trained to overlook. But the most important change was learning to value myself enough to demand better treatment. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving, building a life based on honesty, integrity, and mutual respect. And you know what? That life was better than anything I'd had with Tom. My transformation would inspire other women to take action. The legal system moved slowly, but eventually justice caught up with Tom in ways that satisfied my need for accountability. The criminal court found him guilty of fraud and identity theft, resulting in probation, community service, and mandatory restitution payments that would last years. The divorce court awarded me the majority of our remaining assets and ongoing spousal support, recognizing that Tom's financial abuse had damaged my ability to prepare for retirement. But the most satisfying justice was watching Tom face the natural consequences of his choices. His reputation in the community was permanently damaged, his relationship with Emma was strained and conditional, and his dreams of starting over with Patricia had crumbled when she abandoned him the moment her free ride ended. Tom learned that actions have consequences, that betraying your family's trust has a price, and that not every woman would accept being victimized quietly. He also learned that his daughter inherited her mother's strength and wouldn't tolerate being manipulated or lied to, even by her own father. But the most important victory was still to come. Today, 2 years after discovering Tom's betrayal, Emma and I are living our best lives. She's excelling in veterinary school, I built a successful consulting business helping other women navigate financial abuse, and we've created a home filled with honesty, respect, and genuine support. The money Tom stole has been largely recovered through court orders and asset seizures, but more importantly, we've built financial security that no one can take away from us. I've learned that financial independence isn't just about having money, it's about having the knowledge, skills, and support network to protect yourself and your children from people who would take advantage of your trust. Emma has learned that she doesn't need to depend on anyone else for her success and that she has the strength to overcome any obstacle. As for Tom, he's still paying restitution, still dealing with the consequences of his choices, and still trying to figure out how he lost everything that mattered for a fantasy that was never real. Ladies, the lesson here is simple: trust your instincts, protect your assets, and never let anyone convince you that their betrayal is your fault. You deserve better, your children deserve better, and there's always a way forward if you're brave enough to take it. If you're watching this and recognizing patterns in your own relationship, please know that you're not alone and it's not too late to protect yourself and your family. Financial abuse is real, emotional affairs are devastating, and you don't have to accept either one just to keep the peace. Document everything, seek legal advice, build your support network, and remember that sometimes the best thing you can do for your family is refuse to enable someone else's destructive choices. Share this video with any woman who needs to hear this message. Hit that subscribe button for more real-life stories about overcoming betrayal and building stronger futures. And remember, you're stronger than you think, braver than you feel, and capable of creating the life you deserve, with or without the people who claim to love you but treat you like you don't matter. Because at the end of the day, the best revenge against someone who betrayed your trust isn't getting even, it's building a life so good that their absence becomes a blessing instead of a loss. And trust me, ladies, that kind of happiness is worth fighting for.